Hello ladies, gentlemen, and my NB friends, and welcome back to the Kelde channel. I'm your host, Kelde, and today we're going to be talking about a game that I haven't talked about since 2 videos ago. In a previous Death Must Die video, I hinted towards the major update for the game being on the horizon. Well, as it turns out, the update dropped the day after I posted that video. I've spent a handful of hours playing the update and making note of several changes or new features that I would want to mention in a follow-up. So here we are, a couple videos later, to do a deep dive into Death Must Die's Act 2 update. Let us begin with the obvious. In this Act 2 update, a new selectable mode can be chosen that is called, believe it or not, Act 2. This introduces an entire new map, set of enemies, new bosses, new loot, etc. Act 1 is the content of the game from before, but Act 2 gives us an entirely new set of waves to play through for our 20-minute runs. I honestly really love this. I was curious as to how they'd add more onto the game. Like, would they just add more time to the existing run and make each run 40 minutes? But instead they split them up in the lobby, which I think is the optimal and preferred implementation. There's a lot to ramble about just located within this new act, and I don't want to blab about every single thing. I will say the new landmarks are either super neat or really leave something to be desired. There's no nuance. The same could be said about the new enemies. The cat enemies are really cool once you get used to them. Same with the earth elements. Both enemy types are unique and never get obnoxious. The same can't be said for these things. In the base game, these things are a pain already. With difficulty modifiers on, they're a total pain in the rumpus. They begin to cross the line of fairness. Should you lose a run to these things, it will never feel like a fair defeat, which is my gauge of whether or not an enemy is balanced. Yes, I know that's subjective, I don't care. Continuing, each of the new bosses are really cool, albeit ordered incorrectly. The Cursed is arguably the most difficult boss in the game, and it's so baffling to me. I've never lost to the Djinn, which is the final boss of Act 2, but I've died to the Curse so many blubbing times. Speaking of the order of bosses, in Act 1, the Gargoyles and Necromancers were swapped in time order. Now the Necromancer shows up at 7 minutes in, and the Hands of the Baron will show up at 14. Also, I don't know if I'm mistaken, but it feels like the Gargoyles got a bit of a buff, because they don't seem nearly as easy as before. The Necromancer seems the same though. Still a weak little fella. I mentioned the difficulty modifiers earlier, and with the new update, all of the different difficulty modifiers are available to mix and match for Act 1 and Act 2 off the bat. The higher your difficulty win record, the more modifiers you're allowed to add. Just like prior to the update, the harder the runs, the better the loot. Let's start talking about new stuff for a bit, shall we? Starting with the new playable character, Lorien. Lorien is our second ranged attacker, fancying himself a bow and some killer abs. Lorien is arguably the best character in the game. He's quite good and is my go-to for higher difficulty loot runs. In his base state, he's capable of firing multiple arrows with his attack combo, and his new skill tree has some of the best perks available. Beyond pure gameplay application and the builds he's capable of, Lorien also fits into our cast perfectly. He gels with the other characters well, has a distinct and new personality, and best of all, is capable of striking a pose in the heat of battle. Lorien is not the only one with an attack combo, however, as all other characters, bar Maris, have had their base attacks tweaked slightly. This works fine for some like Scotty, which gives her base attack a 1-2 slash where the second swing provides a larger arc for hitting more enemies. This, in my opinion, heavily nerfs Krant though. Instead of being a behemoth hitting all around him with every swing, he is now a behemoth that will strike all around him with every third swing. This has a negative effect simply because you cannot save your combo progress. Should you stop attacking for a slight second, the combo will reset with the first attack. Does this ruin Krant? No, not at all. Does this weaken him and make his once devastating attack now something you're lucky to line up rather than just the basics of his arsenal? Yes. Thankfully, he's the worst of it. All the other characters are barely affected by this change. If nothing else, it adds some really cool animations. Something I didn't really mention in my previous video was the sign system. That's a good thing, as it's been completely gutted and replaced by individual skill trees for each character. And no, I didn't mention the sign system last time because this was planned, it just wasn't interesting. But now, when you defeat a boss, they will drop skill points for you to pick up. Each character starts with 0 and they work their way up to 36. This adds a longer and better sense of progression to the game and even adds further strategy to character builds. I have a lot of praise for how this new system works, like how you can only have one of the really good abilities at the bottom of any skill tree, or how no matter what character you're progressing, there are multiple ways to build up the skill tree that specialize different playstyles. Your Nixie and my Nixie probably look very different. I'm very curious to see how this system is tweaked or expanded upon in future updates. Will they expand it? Will they redo it completely? Will they leave it be and add a complementary system for progression? These questions factor into one of several reasons as to why I'm very excited for Act 3. if and when it ever comes out. So as it turns out, while I was working on this video, a quality of life update dropped for the game. There isn't anything really worth mentioning about it, just that it adds the option of loadouts for the skill tree system. So now, if you want to try a different build, you don't need to completely reset the current branch you have going. This will make achievement hunting and experimentation a lot easier. Lorien wasn't the only new character they added, by the way. He's the new playable character, but we also got a new deity to bestow blessings upon us mortals. Nin, the goddess of earth, gives you blessings based around, well, rocks. Some blessings stun enemies, others will just get in your way. A couple of the blessings are actually quite neat. Earth Spike is a genuinely really good strike skill to have in your arsenal. Rock Shield can be useful, albeit gimmicky and unreliable at times. Landslide is good if you get it at a decent rarity, and Rock Hands just looks absolutely silly. Also, why is it a cast blessing? You could have made this a Suddler, Crumbling Floor, PAOE, ability like Radiance or Fear. Oh, also the blessing just isn't that great. I would say that Nin is a decent addition that has a couple of useful blessings. Am I disappointed if she's the deity I land on? No. Do I typically use alterations to roll for a different deity if I can? Yes. I really struggle to see how she could be an optimal pick for any run, outside of maxing out Earthspike. It doesn't help that she just doesn't have a large pool of blessings to choose from at the moment. I think Nin could be better in a future update, should she be reworked and tweaked a fair bit. This of course isn't impossible, especially since the Act 2 update reworked a lot of existing deities to some extent. Some blessings, notably Serendipity, have been moved from one deity's possession to another. All deities have been given at least one new blessing to play with, like Summer's new summon skill of Fire Elements, which summons the cutest little firefoxes that will kill the inhabitants of Death's Realm for you. The Radiance and Fear skills I mentioned earlier are new as well, and they belong to Lady Justice and Mort respectively. These slight changes in rebalancing makes a lot of the game feel fresh. It's really cool to see more summon skills given to other deities that aren't named Mort. There is a bit of a negative to this unfortunately, and that being not all blessings are created equal. Ironically, after saying that, the biggest offenders are existing spells. Time Field and Ball Lightning are busted as hell. Time Chud will slow down and deal damage to enemies inside of it. Fair enough, but I swear they increase the damage because this will obliterate any non-boss enemy that touches it. Riz Lightning is in the same boat where it will just melt anything, including the final boss. This should not be possible. These two blessings feel as though they've been buffed tremendously since the update. I could be mistaken, but they certainly stand out now. On the opposite side, you have two new blessings that are unfortunately very underwhelming. Energy Missiles and to a much lesser extent Light Rays both leave something to be desired. Light Rays is alright if you already have Lady Justice, but it's never a blessing to actively seek out. Energy Missiles though? Ugh. Energy Missiles deals barely any damage whatsoever to the enemies. It might kill the minions, but why am I going to contribute my time and levels trying to milk some application out of a blessing that just doesn't have any? If that's a question you have to ask, then it's probably not a good blessing. The final blessing related thing we need to touch on is the way that the game balances how many and what kind of blessings you can have. I've thrown words like cast and summon out when referring to specific blessings. Each blessing that a deity bestows belongs to a specific subcategory. These categories are attack, dash, cast, power, strike, summon, and passive. The attack and dash categories are something we're already familiar with. Each deity has a blessing that adds an effect to your basic means of damage and movement. The others are determined via how they activate though. Summon pertains to any blessing that gives you a companion or companions to attack enemies. Passive blessings are pretty self-explanatory. Cast blessings are ones with an active cooldown between the effects triggers. Strike blessings activate when you attack, and finally power blessings just sorta happen, either continuously or under certain circumstances, like dashing. The cool part about this system is how each character has their own table and spread of how many blessings of certain types they can have at one time. This adds a layer of strategy as you're now limited as to how many specific blessings you can snag in a certain run. Something that takes this to the next level is how the new skill tree system, as well as some gear you can get, will increase the amount of specific blessing slots you have available. For example, you could find gear that increases your summon slot by 1, or your strike slot by 1, stuff like that. This not only works to provide you with more options, but it also lets you fine-tune each character to fit a build that works best for you. When I say planning and strategy of this game has layers, I mean it. Just ignore the current exploits. The final thing I have noted down to mention may seem insignificant compared to everything else I've said thus far. To be honest, it kind of is, but still. Last video I mentioned how cool the bookshelf system was, and how I wish the spawn rate of the bookshelf locations and runs was increased. As it turns out, they did exactly that. Bookshelves are now more common, and my lore collection has grown substantially. It's a little thing, but I'm really glad they made this change. I think Death Must Die is a very competent game, and the last major update turned what was already a pretty good product into something even better. If the game seems slightly intriguing, I highly recommend that you give it a try. It's affordable and legitimately one of the better games I've played this year. I don't plan to make any more videos on Death Must Die unless the next big update is absolutely amazing and it does a whole lot to change or balance the current meta. If I ever get to difficulty 100 for Act 1 or Act 2, I might record and upload a successful run to the channel just for fun. But I'm kind of struggling at difficulty 40 and 50, so I've got quite a ways to go. Yes, I'm bad at video games. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please leave a like. If my style intrigued you in any way, might I encourage you to subscribe or check out some of my other recent videos. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. I hope you have a great one. Okay, bye-bye.